My brother stole my college fund, and in return, I exposed him at his graduation. I didn't plan to expose my brother on one of the biggest days of his life. That wasn't something I dreamed about or fantasized over. In fact, for a long time, I did everything I could to protect him, even when my own life was quietly falling apart. But there comes a point where staying silent starts costing you more than speaking up ever could. And for me, that point came when I finally understood what had really happened to the future I was promised. Growing up, college wasn't just an idea in my family, it was a guarantee, or at least, that's how it was presented to me. My parents weren't rich, but they were careful. They talked a lot about planning ahead, about sacrifice, about how education was the one thing no one could ever take away from you. From the time I was little, I was told there was a fund set aside for my education. Not just for me, but for my older brother too. My brother, Mark, was always the golden one. He was loud, confident, and naturally good at being liked. Teachers loved him, relatives bragged about him. He didn't have to try very hard to be seen as special. I was the quieter one. The kid who followed rules, got good grades, and didn't cause trouble. I didn't shine, but I was steady. And growing up, I thought that counted for something. Our parents talked openly about the college fund at family dinners, especially when relatives were around. They'd say things like, "Both our kids will graduate debt-free," or "We've been saving since they were born." Every time they said it, I felt safe. Like no matter what else went wrong in my life, that part was handled. When Mark went off to college first, I remember being genuinely proud of him. He chose a private school, more expensive than what I'd imagined, but my parents didn't seem worried. They said they had it under control. They said Mark deserved it. I didn't question it because why would I? This was the plan we'd all agreed on, even if I'd never seen the numbers myself. While Mark was away, I stayed home, finished high school, and worked part-time. I saved what I could, not because I thought I'd need it for tuition, but because I wanted some independence. I told myself it was good practice. Being responsible felt like my role in the family, even if no one ever said that out loud. The first time something felt off was during my senior year. I started asking more questions about applications, deposits, and timelines. Every time I brought it up, the answers were vague. My parents told me not to stress. They said everything was fine. They said Mark's situation was different because he needed more support at the time. I told myself that made sense. He was older. He was figuring things out. I was used to being patient. It came naturally to me by then, but then small things started piling up. Mark came home more often than I expected. He talked about switching majors, about extra semesters, about needing more money for housing changes and program fees. My parents always seemed tense after those conversations, but they never explained why. One night, I overheard my mom on the phone, whispering in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen, but my name came up. I heard her say, "She'll understand," followed by, "She's not like him." That stuck with me. I didn't know what it meant, but it didn't feel good. I asked my dad about the fund a few days later. I tried to sound casual, like I was just double-checking details. He smiled and said, "Don't worry about that right now. Focus on finishing strong." I wanted to believe him, so I did. That was my pattern back then. If something didn't feel right, I explained it away. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself families don't intentionally hurt each other. I told myself that patience would be rewarded. The real shift happened when acceptance letters started coming in. I got into a state university I'd worked hard for. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. I was proud of myself. When I showed my parents the letter, their reaction wasn't what I expected. They hugged me, sure, but there was hesitation. A pause that lingered too long. That night, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. I asked how much money was actually left for my college. The room went quiet in a way that made my chest tighten. My parents exchanged a look, the kind that means a conversation has already happened without you. My mom finally said, "We need to talk about expectations." That sentence alone changed everything. They told me the fund had been used up. Slowly, over time, tuition increases, extra years, living expenses, mistakes. They said Mark needed more help than expected. They said they didn't think it would all add up the way it did. I asked how much was left. My dad avoided my eyes when he said, "There isn't anything left." I remember nodding. I remember saying okay. I remember going to my room and sitting on my bed for hours, staring at the wall. I wasn't screaming or crying. I felt hollow, like something fundamental had been removed from my life without my permission. What hurt the most wasn't just the money, it was the assumption. The quiet decision that my future was more flexible, that I could adapt, that I'd figure it out. No one asked me, they just decided. I took out loans, I worked more hours, I went to school part-time at first. Every time I struggled, I reminded myself that this was temporary, that I was strong enough to carry it. That resentment wouldn't help me move forward. Mark graduated eventually, late but celebrated. He came back home with stories and confidence and no debt. Everyone congratulated him. No one mentioned what it cost me. I told myself I was over it. I told myself family was more important than fairness. I told myself exposure wouldn't fix anything. But the truth sat with me, heavy and unresolved, growing louder every year. By the time Mark's graduation ceremony came around, I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. And clarity has a way of making silence impossible. I showed up to Mark's graduation with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. It wasn't forced, and it wasn't numb either. It was the kind of calm that comes when you've already grieved something privately and reached the point where the truth matters more than keeping the peace. I sat in the audience with my parents, listening to speeches about hard work and sacrifice, and every word felt slightly off. Not wrong exactly, just incomplete. When Mark walked across the stage, everyone clapped. My parents stood up. My mom cried. I clapped too, because part of me was still proud of him. That never went away. What changed was my willingness to keep carrying a burden that wasn't mine alone. I watched him smile, confident and relaxed, wearing a cap paid for by money that was supposed to give both of us a chance. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn. There were balloons, photos, hugs, and laughter. Relatives kept coming up to me, telling me how lucky Mark was, how proud my parents must be. A few even asked where I was headed for school, assuming I'd be next. Each time, I smiled and gave vague answers. I could feel something building inside me, not anger, but pressure, like holding your breath for too long. Mark eventually came over, diploma in hand, glowing. He hugged me and said, "Couldn't have done it without you guys." I knew he meant our parents, not me specifically, but the words landed anyway. I looked at him and realized something important. He genuinely didn't know, or at least he'd never been forced to face the full cost of what he received. I asked him if we could talk somewhere quieter. He looked surprised but nodded. We walked a short distance away, still within sight of everyone, but far enough that our voices wouldn't carry. My heart was pounding, but my mind felt steady. I told him I was proud of him. I told him I was glad he made it through. Then I told him I needed to say something that wasn't easy. I explained what happened with the college fund from my side. I told him about the loans, the extra jobs, the years I spent juggling classes and shifts while pretending I was fine. I told him I didn't blame him for needing help, but I blamed him for never asking questions, for never noticing that I paid the price for his comfort. At first he laughed a little, like he thought I was exaggerating. Then he saw my face. I wasn't accusing, I wasn't yelling, I was explaining. Slowly, his expression changed. He said he thought our parents had saved more. He said he didn't realize it had run out completely. I believed him. That didn't make it hurt less. People started drifting closer, sensing something serious was happening. My parents noticed too. My mom walked over, her smile fading as she heard fragments of the conversation. She told me we could talk about this later. She said this wasn't the time or place. That's when something in me shifted from private honesty to public truth. I told her this was the only time it ever felt possible, that every other moment had been dismissed or delayed. I said I wasn't trying to ruin anything, but I was done pretending this didn't shape my life. I said it calmly, clearly, without raising my voice. That made it harder for anyone to dismiss me as emotional or dramatic. The reactions came fast after that. Some relatives looked uncomfortable, others looked confused. A few looked angry, like I'd broken an unspoken rule. Mark stood there, silent now, staring at the ground. My dad finally spoke and admitted that the fund had been used unevenly. He said they assumed I'd manage. That sentence said more than he probably intended. There was no big scene, no shouting, just a quiet unraveling of a story everyone thought they understood. I didn't expose Mark to punish him. I exposed the truth because I was tired of carrying it alone. Standing there, I felt lighter than I had in years, even though I knew the fallout wouldn't be easy. The weeks after graduation were uncomfortable. Some family members avoided me, others reached out quietly, saying they hadn't known. My parents were defensive at first, then distant. Eventually, we talked, really talked. They admitted they'd relied on my resilience without asking what it cost me. They apologized, not perfectly, but sincerely. Mark and I didn't speak for a while. When we did, it was awkward. He told me he felt guilty. I told him guilt wasn't what I wanted. I wanted awareness. I wanted him to understand that fairness isn't automatic just because no one intended harm. Over time, our relationship shifted. It became more honest, less idealized, but also more real. I didn't get my college fund back. That part didn't magically fix itself. What I got instead was something I didn't know I needed as much. I got my voice back. I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. I stopped telling myself that being strong meant staying silent. Years later, when people ask me about that day, I don't describe it as revenge or exposure. I describe it as a correction. A moment when the story everyone told about our family finally matched reality. It didn't break us. It forced us to see each other clearly. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments and consider subscribing for more stories like this. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that set us free.